The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your healthcare needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in healthcare.
Thank you. If you would be seated, please. This brings us to the approval of the official agenda. I just kind of got things out of whack just a little bit, but have all of you had an opportunity to look at the official agenda tonight? Do you have any questions?
Ms. Mayor, give us just a second to look at this that was on the table before us here.
Okay.
Number 10D will be a report from the Organization and Operation Committee with recommendation.
Okay. I've got that. Okay, very good. Any other questions? There have been a few things deleted, I believe you'll notice there. Do I have a motion that we approve tonight's agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I note that Mr. Wallace is here, I'm assuming, to talk about the OCEDA budget, and it's listed on the consent agenda, so
He'd probably like that.
he can probably, we probably ought to recognize him to talk before approval of the consent agenda or something. Or remove that item from the consent agenda, whatever your pleasure is.
I'll remove it and put it in the mayor's business. It's item C, and the mayor's, item E, excuse me. Any other comments? Do I have a motion of approval of the official agenda?
I move that the agenda be approved.
We have a motion to approve the agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion to second. All those in favor of approval of the agenda, please raise your hands. Thank you. That brings us down to item of comments by the mayor and the Board of Aldermen. I'm sure I'll be commenting a lot as the night goes on. Are there any, do we have any comments by any of the aldermen at this particular point?
Mr. Mayor, Board, just a very quick report. I do not see anyone from the Downtown Association here. They held an annual meeting last night. I attended the meeting, and my comment, in addition to some very interesting activities that they have planned for the Christmas season and other seasons surrounding downtown, the thing I really want to report is the very many comments that were made about their pleasure with the sidewalk construction and the improvements that have been made downtown, and how pleased and grateful they are to see the accumulation of a project talked about. I would have said 30 years ago. I was corrected by an older timer at the meeting and said, no, 40 years ago, and I said, yes, ma'am. But they expressed considerable appreciation for the project, what it has done, and the improvements to Main Street.
And do you not have also where they're wanting to say plant the planters themselves without an expense to the city?
They also indicated that given the tight budget with respect to this project, they had volunteered to make the plantings in the planters that are up and down Main Street, perhaps with the cooperation of some other groups, and I'm sure they will be here to present that at some point, their plans for the planting.
Thank you, Mr. McLaurin. That brings us down to the approval of the meetings, of the regular meetings of September the 12th.
I move that the September 12th, 2005 minutes be approved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Did you want?
We do have that little correction.
It has been made.
Yes, sir.
All those in favor, please raise your hands. It's 6-1. Brings us down to the consent agenda. We have the item that we have taken off of the consent thing for the acceptance of the OCEDA budget. The first item is the approval of the September 2005 claims dockets and the August 2005 financials. The electric department request authorization to advertise for bids for the construction of a primary line from Sand Road to South Montgomery Street. A request authorization to advertise for bids for the sale of scrap copper and aluminum wire. Personnel, the approval of hiring John McCarter as a lieutenant for the fire department at a salary of $32,003.19. Approval of hiring 2 maintenance workers, Timmy Neal and Christopher Smiley at the salary of $15,891.34. The approval of the writer for the vehicle maintenance was to be deleted from the agenda. Public Service Department request approval to advertise for sealed bids to upgrade the Trim Cane Sewer Pumping Station. Request approval for hiring of Clearwater consultants to assist with sewer main and lateral design for annexed areas. Request approval for mayor to re-sign a service application with Ford County Power Association. Request of approval to accept the urban forest grant that we've received. Request approval to advertise for sealed bids for trees and installation service for the urban forest grant. Any questions on the consent agenda? Do I have a motion that we approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I will move that the consent agenda be approved, and if the motion receives a second before we vote, just by way of elaboration and explanation to the public here assembled, as well as the media, I would like for several of the department heads to comment upon the projects that are contained therein.
Okay. The electric department, is this not pertaining where we were trying to strike a deal on a sewer line and get a right of way that, several weeks ago? And I assume that the sewer line got, resolved along with the right of way?
It's pending, yes.
Mr. Hathaway, more specifically, the construction of the primary line from Sand Road to South Montgomery, perhaps a few comments on the improvement that this will make to our distribution system, particularly in the south part of town.
This line will actually be constructed underground from the Sand Road area over to the South Montgomery area. This line will also be able to give us the ability to separate out some heavy load that we have down on the lower end of South Montgomery, and will also give us a two-way feed in case of emergency, such as a tornado tearing down a part of one line, or so we can actually feed in two directions, and should be able to get the customer a lot better service than what's presently being provided.
Essentially bringing also some more stability to the distribution of power in the southern part of the city.
Yes.
With this feed. Okay, thank you. The fire chief, there he is. Chief, just a comment or two on the lieutenant position and the staffing at the fire department and things of that sort.
Lieutenant is basically a company officer that oversees each engine company. And with the retirement of Lieutenant Calvin Poe, opened up a lieutenant slot at Station 3. John McCarter was fortunate enough through written tests, physical fitness tests, evaluations, and a national standard test, he came out on top or accumulated the most points, so he was promoted to lieutenant. He was a sergeant.
All right, thank you. Mr. Devlin, perhaps a comment or two on or Mr. Webb, or both. Is Mr. Webb here?
Yes.
The upgrade of the Trim Cane sewer pumping station and the annexed area design improvements, a couple of comments there.
We're just about to wrap up the $3.5 million project where we ran sewer interceptors through the annexed area. It'll be finished shortly. The next weak link in the chain is all the effluent from the new North Yosi pumping station will have to go through the Trim Cane pumping station and then pump from there. This station is old. It doesn't have the capacity it's going to need to handle the flows whenever you come into it. So this is just the next step in the chain to upgrade the system and handle development in the annexed areas.
All right, thank you.
While you're up, why don't you comment about the urban forestry grant, because I think you're the one who wrote that.
The grant application was to plant 180 trees at the four quadrants at the 182 and Mississippi 25 interchange out here on the bypass. We estimate the project cost to be about $20,000, and they'll pay 75% of it, or $15,000, and then our obligation will be 25%, which is $5,000.
Alderman Cox, just out of curiosity, I don't recall this being a budgeted item in this year's budget. A comment or two on the funding of our local share.
That's correct. It was not budgeted for, but Mr. Devlin is going to work his half of that component into the landscaping current budget, and we'll work with Mr. Webb to see if he can come up with the other half from the streets portion, since it is kind of a joint program, and we'll make sure that if these are approved, that we attribute those to the appropriate line items into the budget.
Is that where you took part of my travel monies?
No, that was just a matter of principle. Mr. Mayor or Mr. Devlin, these trees, what exactly is the nature of the project?
Do you want to know the type of tree?
No, we don't want to know the type of trees. I want to know where, how many it is. What? It's over
180 something.
Okay, 180 trees, divided between the four quadrants, the interior areas of the interchanges. So we're gonna, depending on the size, the amount of trees once those are installed, then, the city will take over perpetual maintenance and care of those sections.
So in reality, a continuation of the previously approved and implemented urban forestry grants where we have been periodically upgrading the landscape of bypass.
Yeah, this one was a separate grant, but it's similar to the one that was done down at the Highway 12 and 20 Drive.
Thank you. Say, I don't know if we got a second on that.
We did not get a second. Do we have a second on the motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please raise your hand. 100%. This brings us to the public hearing of the City of Starkville's comprehensive plan. This will be actually the fifth time, I believe, that this has been talked about, and we thought we would do tonight is if we had any concerned citizens that would like to have any questions about it or come forth and voice your concern. Floor is now open.
I have a letter that
How about saying who you are? We all know who you are, but some of these folks in the back may not know who
Bill
you are.
Stark, I'm the former city attorney, and I have some concerns about the comprehensive plan. And I've handed out a letter to the board because they asked for comments in writing, and so if anyone who wants to get a copy of it, I can give you a copy of it, but I didn't make enough copies to bring for everybody. So if I could, I'd like to read the letter, and
Sure.
so everybody can hear. Maybe they have the same concerns. This is to the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. Several months ago, we had a town meeting to discuss the comprehensive plan. Ms. Shelley Johnson, architect of the plan, said that it was not a final product and that she had some additional changes she wanted to make. I do not know that she ever made any changes in the plan. I hope that she would request some citizen input from landowners in the affected area where the property is zoned for commercial use. But on the comprehensive plan, the same property is proposed for residential use. Needless to say, there is a great disparity between the zoning ordinance for property in the annexed area and the proposed comprehensive plan. The city spent a year or more zoning the annexed area with the involvement of city planner Larry Jones and landowners. The city spent another year with city planner Shelley Johnson to develop a comprehensive plan. Why don't we spend some time with our new city planner, George Rummel, to bring the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance closer together? The disparity between the two leaves uncertainty, and it's misleading, which may be worse than nothing at all. A landowner wanting to sell or develop his or her property does not know how to market his or her property. Which is binding, the zoning ordinance or the comprehensive plan? We are told that the comprehensive plan is not legally binding, but when does it become legally binding? When the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan are not in accord, which prevails? A potential developer does not know if the property is properly zoned for commercial or residential development. The zoning ordinance tells the developer that he can locate a commercial development anywhere on the bypass, but the comprehensive plan shows only a few commercial areas approved for the same. Personally, I own over 300 acres of land inside the city limits in the area proposed for the extension of Stark Road north and east to Hospital Road. This area could be developed with a mix of residential, multifamily, and commercial, somewhat similar to the newer areas of suburban Atlanta, where commercial and residential blend together. Some of my property has been zoned as multifamily along Reed Road, and approximately 120 acres where Stark Road extends north is zoned commercial, red, but the comprehensive plan proposes residential. So at best, it's confusing. As for my property, the fact that the comprehensive plan shows the entire area as single-family residential a commercial developer would not be interested in looking at the property for development. A developer who is proposing a planned unit development wants to be assured that he has proper zoning for the property, which is in accord with the comprehensive plan, before he invests money in an option to purchase and hires an architect to draw preliminary plans. I believe it's in the best interest of the city and its citizen landowners to take some time to modify the comprehensive plan. Obviously, not all the property on both sides of the bypass should be commercial, but neither should it all be residential. If we do not compromise somewhere, we leave the decision to the Planning and Zoning Commission without any direction, which is unfair to the members of the commission and unfair to the citizens of our city.
May I answer you?
Sure.
The last meeting that we had, this seems to be one of the bones of contention with the comprehensive plan. And Mr. Rummel made it very clear at the time that the current zoning, which I don't think you're displeased with, at the current zoning of your properties, are you? Will state that it will not change to the proposed future use. And then we've had a hard time getting the citizenry to understand that we do not intend to say change what we have. That was only a proposed things. You will have, your commercial properties will still be commercial. There will be no change in zoning from the existing plan.
Why not change the comprehensive plan then to accommodate the zoning ordinance?
Well, we're thinking in terms of that. And I think that the next time we have the proposal, which will be on the 18th, I believe is when we have it set up, is that we will possibly have the proposed changes in there. I think that would be more favorable to the citizens' input than what is currently there now.
Just have to wait
And I
for
think
that.
that's what you wanted to hear, was it not? Thank you.
Mr. Stark, just one other issue. In your first part of your letter, you talked about that there were going to be additional changes made and they hadn't been made to date. And some of that's process oriented. What the intent was is for us to go through the public hearing process and really listen to the public comments. This was intended to be the last public hearing. And then from here, we'll be putting together all of those comments and putting together what we'll call a final comprehensive plan or a final draft, whatever the right word is. And we should have that at our meeting on the 18th. But that's why it may seem like we should have done it, but we wanted to go through and hear all of the public comments and give plenty of time for that comment before we started revising, before we revised that document. So it wasn't that we weren't listening, it's just that was the way the process was originally intended.
My concern was that in the disparity of the two, and you say that it's not going to change my zoning, but when you put a comprehensive plan out there,
And it shows it all residential, that's correct.
yeah, and somebody coming in from the outside sees that. And
Very disturbed.
Yeah, and it just doesn't work. And
I'm sure I would have been more vocal than what you've been.
And they were not here at the meeting to hear you say about
Right.
what you said about the zoning. So that, we just send the wrong message, I think, if we have two different things.
And you raised some interesting issues in here that Mr. Rummel has just received some additional discs that she was making recommendations with, and he has been very methodical at going through this comprehensive plan and is looking at things and issues very carefully.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else pertaining to the comprehensive plan?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
just one quick comment. If anybody has any written comments, you can either send them to me at City Hall or grummel@cityofstarkville.org. Because this is how I incorporate into it. Don't go by hearsay or anything else. Send me written comments within the framework. Also, whenever you go online right now, it's still going to say draft. I realize some of you had concerns about, we've had problems getting a PDF document where we can edit to add and delete items inside. And as soon as that's done, we'll be able to look and it will change from draft to revised draft. Thank you.
Mr. Rummel, if we were to have a revised draft to incorporate all of those suggestions and changes, et cetera, presented on the 18th, when would the cutoff date be for those written comments to you?
That's a good question because I don't know. The reason why I say that is depending upon the extensiveness of the concept, of the concerns, because some of them we can just slash out, some of them might require a rewrite. So, but by and large, I think most of them will either be slight additions or slight deletions.
Would you say then by Thursday of this week would be an appropriate time to cut off
If-
any additional comment? We have had the 5 public hearings.
As a cutoff date, that would be fine.
Okay.
And then that will give me 2 weeks to edit on it as well as the future land use map.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This brings us, any other questions pertaining?
Real quick, less than a minute. My name is Jason Louie. I live at 202 East Gillespie Street. My wife and I have concerns with some of the language in the May 17th draft of the comprehensive plan. Our issue is not with the land use map, but with ambiguous language concerning traffic diversion and dispersion in historic neighborhoods. I've expressed these concerns in writing to the mayor, board of aldermen, and our city planner. I've provided specific suggestions on how the language could be amended to make it fair to all neighborhood collector streets. I hope you will consider my suggestions. Thank you for your time.
He will. You got your, he just asked for written comments.
I
He's
gave
gonna-
it to him right before the meeting.
Anyone else? That stops the hearing. We are ready for public appearances, and tonight we have Mr. Schaefer, who is going to give us a presentation on the proposed justice complex.
I never know when I push that button whether it's going to work or not. So, good evening. Tammy's passing out some drawings to all of you. I thought I'd very quickly go through some of the preliminary stuff that I presented at the last board meeting for some of the folks that haven't had an opportunity to see this. So I will go quickly. We have been given the charge to look at Block 18A, which is located, well, it's bounded on 4 sides by Lafayette Street on the east, Jefferson Street on the south, Martin Luther King Drive, Old Highway 82 on the north, and Dr. Connor Drive on the west. This property, this 1 block area contains about 2.8 acres and has 10 individual pieces of property located on within that block. The only information that was available was the assessed value of these pieces of property, and so I offer those only for reference. I have no understanding as to how that number necessarily relates to purchase price or other negotiations that may take place, but the assessed value is about $523,000. This 1 block area, as you can see, has a number of existing buildings on that. It's desirable for the Justice Complex because it's, of course, immediately adjacent to the existing jail. We've also had the electric department added to the original program that was generated for the police and the court. And of course, that's desirable with this downtown location. What we looked at creating was a justice complex and electric department that made up the entire block. And I'll go into this in a little more detail, but basically the 3 pieces are the police department to the north, the electric department in the middle, and the court and court administration to the south. And there's secure parking to the west and public parking to the east, and another little piece of public parking to the southeast. The size requirements, the police department's is about 31,000, the court administration 9,400, and the electric department about 10,500. We're hoping with the development of this block, it would encourage development in this area of town. There could be development on the south side by private landowners. There could be development on the east side by private landowners, or the possibility of expanded use, governmental use in the future. There was also the plan that was produced by the landscape students suggested a exterior public space, and so we looked at the possibility of maybe that occurring sometime in the future. We generated some images of what this complex could look like. It needed to be public and welcoming, but it also needed to function for the police, the court, and the everyday in and out business of the Starkville Electric Department. The idea that it might have a public image with a bell tower, parking immediately in front, so when you're running in to pay your bill and out, and there would also be colonnade and a drive-through area for the paying of bills. The intersection of Lafayette and Old Highway 82 we think would be an important intersection for many people moving through town. And so with the police on that corner, we think that presents a very good image for the community. And of course, this would also start to bring a connection back to Main Street. And looking at this building from the southeast corner, this is the entrance into the court. Mr. Mills asked for a floor plan at our last meeting, and I explained to him that there are just a little over 200 rooms in this program, and I intended to go through every one of them this evening. And room number one, I'll spare you. If you follow this key in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see what the parts of the building we're talking about. This is the court and court administration. And so as you come into that 9,400 square foot building, there would be the entrance and lobby, and you would move through the circulation into the court. To get your feel, this court would be about twice as large as this room. This room holds about 60 seated. This court would hold 122. The judge would be on axis, and the circulation would be clear. Support spaces on the left as you come in. The judge and prosecutor spaces would be to the back of the court, and they would be able to enter and exit the building through a secured entry. And the public would enter in and also have security through a metal detector vestibule. The court administration is everything in red. There are times when you have questions or need to pay a ticket, and that would all be done from the public lobby, so when folks are coming and going, they can very quickly deal with that. And the entry to the court administration, again, would be from the secured area in the back. The electric department would occupy the middle of the H, essentially, and as Ed Hadaway explains, they need a bank lobby, essentially. They need to come into a very welcoming space. They need a receptionist that can either solve their problems or send them through to the cashiers. There's places that they need to fill out paperwork and things like that. So this becomes a welcoming and open lobby that you would be able to see the cashiers and have enough room to come and go, and all of that would be public. Again, the electric department would be, employees would enter from the secured area in the back and be able to get to the cashier area. And also the collection manager has to interface with the public, and so that would be directly off the lobby. And the large vault storage area would also be on this floor, which generates the majority of the paperwork. The other office spaces would be on the second floor. As you would come up, there's a conference room that would be accessible. The manager and accountant's offices would be directly at the top of the stairs. The office equipment, computer rooms, and then there's a large suite with clerk's offices and storage and workroom. And so that would be about 10,500 square feet for the electric department. And you can see it's although it's a single building shape, this is totally separated in terms of security from the court and from the police department. The third department, of course, is the Starkville Police. They would have a plaza in front and a large public area for people to come and go, and they need to interface with the records. This, of course, would be a public area and then a secured area to get to the rest of the facilities. The police employees would all have a large entrance off the back of the building, again off of the secure parking. Police breaks into a number of different areas. The records area has some interface with the public. The telecommunication area needs to be secure, and it has its own door, restroom, and office so that all the dispatch can take place in a secured area. With this design, the patrol generally would occupy the middle of the space, and so they're the ones that come and go. The chief explains they are capable of tearing up a ball bearing with a rubber hammer, and so we have given them lots of room to bump around and get in and out of that area from roll call and from their other paperwork activities. Evidence is another very secure area off to the south, and the sergeant, lieutenant, and supply officers would be in their wing. The other two pieces that are so important in the department is the booking and holding. And of course, if you're arriving at that entrance, you would come through the sally port. That is not the way you want to come visit this building. I would suggest the public entry is much better. But this secure area, of course, also would connect to the court facilities. On the second floor, as you would come up, if you needed to go to the administration area, see the chief, at the very top of the steps is that suite with the chief, assistant chief, and the other workers in that area. The important part of this area is the Emergency Operations Center, the EOC. And again, as you can see, that's absolutely in the middle of the complex. And in cases of emergencies, this is the area that will run our city until we're back up. Now, we're assuming with the electric department closed, we'll get up sooner than we would have in the past. But this will be a very important room in this complex. The other functions on the second floor are primarily the detective offices. There are the narcotics detectives, there are the regular detectives, there's the DARE and COP programs, and the CSI program also at the top of the steps. The remaining space are for the staff support and building support on that floor, and that makes up a total of essentially 31,000 square feet. Now, the cost of this project, the last time I met with you was on September the 6th, and I had the cost of the entire project, including the construction, furniture, fixtures, equipment, reimbursables, and fees. We were at essentially $7.9 million. As you all know, we've had some severe weather since that time, and I'm suggesting that we need to add 10% to that figure based on the increased cost because of the two hurricanes that we've had. So I'm now suggesting that this project is about an $8.6, $8.7 million project plus site acquisition. And for those of you that have not had the opportunity to fly through, this is what the complex would start to look like. This is Main Street, and as you know, we would be north on Lafayette, so you're coming north on Lafayette, and this is what the public space would start to look like. And again, our project is on the left. I'm not suggesting that this is anything on the right, but a notion. You can see the police would be behind that bell tower. The electric department would be in the middle, and the court would be to the south side. And we're putting Mr. Perkins over here on the left with his new house and office as he develops the attorney's row down there. And of course, that is the police, the jail right there. When you're looking at it from the back side, you can see that secured parking area, so all the vehicles would be protected. There's still some public parking to the right. And you can see, even though the site is very tight, there is still room for expansion. As we look back up towards Main Street on Lafayette, you can see it would be wonderful to create this exterior space virtually with 2 barricades. We could secure the entire area and have many of our outdoor events in this area. But in the future, if we are developing more, we would suggest considering additional public parking, and at the very left is the existing public parking that we currently have. And that's it, and we'll park it back in plan.
Any questions from board members?
Chief Lindley, could you talk a little bit about the holding cells? And I guess I remember from the previous proposal that there was some concerns from the public that it would be a jail. And could you just speak clearly about these holding cells, how long someone might be there, whether it is indeed a jail, et cetera?
It is not a jail. It would be temporary detention. What you would have there would be, for instance, if you took someone into custody and you had a short-term wait for an hour or two, we would be able to put them there as opposed to doing the official, put them in the county jail, dress them out, book them in, all that type of stuff. And that would be easier on them and us because it might just be a matter of getting someone responsible. Let's say in the case of someone that's intoxicated, come back responsible for them. Another thing would be where you could put prisoners that are waiting to come forward. So you could bring 1 or 2 prisoners in at a time, as opposed to in this room where we sometimes have as many as 15 or 20 people in here at once, which brings about security problems in the court. Everybody remembers what happened in Atlanta not too long ago. So those are some of the basic features. We have, of course, a male and female side. You have a space there to run people on the intoxilizer and things of that nature. Just basic temporary detention function, but absolutely not a jail.
With temporary detention, is that like 1 to 2 hours? It's not like
It would be
24
no more
hours?
than that. I can't imagine it being any more than 3 or 4 because you just can't simply hold people that long unless you get into the full jailer present and all that.
Any other board comments? Thank you very much, Gary. We will continue to assess this, and that we will be back soon.
Thank you.
This brings us down to citizens' comments. This is where you have the opportunity to have 3 minutes to give us a hard time up here, or state your concerns, do whatever you'd like to do at this particular point. Mr. McLean,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
if you would identify yourself for those that don't know you.
I'm George McLean, 512 Green Street. Longtime resident of Starkville. Saturday night, we had a tragic event that occurred on the property of Highland Plantation, resulting from a vehicle striking a pedestrian and a loss of life, a young man. I'm very, very appalled at the thought where we would be tonight, had that been one of our off-duty policemen driving a city vehicle. And yet I understand that we have 17 officers that are permitted the privilege of driving these vehicles to and from work. Well, that's at their own discretion, 24 hours a day. And these people live some distance, of course, out of town. And the mileage, of course, would accumulate rather quickly. Now, what I'd like to, does the insurance carrier have this information in the file? The fact that these guys are using the vehicle like that. To me, it seems like a very serious liability exposure. I don't have any problem with each individual that uses this privilege and do it himself. But someone had to give authorization. And I think that the public should know who the ones authorized that, where it came from, previous board authorization, whether it's in the employment contract or what. Now, getting back to the mileage that they are driving, each individual accumulates 343 total miles per day based on the mileage from their residence to City Hall. 343 miles per day. Per year, that totals 86,230 miles. And when you compute that at 48.5% per mile, we have an additional cost to the taxpayers now, $41,822. And that's a sizable amount. How much does this enhance the salaries and benefits of all these individuals? And yet there's no tax deduction for it from it or anything. It's my opinion that due to the enormity of this situation, that quick and thorough action be taken to correct this situation for the people of this city. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Is there someone else that'd like to speak at this time?
I'm Pat Sanderson, 301 Carver Drive, Rayston Apartments, and I have concern that my property will suffer from flooding as a result of the drainage, storm drainage of a new development on Hospital Road and Carver Drive. Hospital Road, there's a land area being developed adjacent to Hospital Road and Jackson and Carver's dead end. It's a large tract of land with lots of natural springs, a creek running through it, large gullies and holes that has been retaining water. And this is being developed, and the drainage from all of this is going to be piped into the creek. They're digging out the creek and making it deeper and bigger. They're laying pipe and they're going to drain all of that water, but it will end at the beginning of my property. At the end of that property, at the beginning of my property, that's where the water will enter the creek. The creek is currently not flowing freely. It has a lot of shrubs, it has a lot of trees. My property is low-lying property, as is much of the property on Carver Drive. So Carver Drive, which ends at Brooksville Gardens, and I drove through Brooksville Gardens this afternoon, and I saw that that same creek goes through several different pieces of Brooksville Gardens. And those drainage ditches appear to be rather cleaned out. But the drainage ditch behind my property for all of Harbor Drive appears to be totally overgrown. And I'm very, very concerned that when all of this water that has been diffused throughout this vacant, undeveloped land, when all of that is channeled into this one ditch that is not cleared out, that my property is going to be flooded. So I really would appreciate it if the aldermen and the mayor and the people concerned would be, take mind to make sure that flooding does not happen on my property as a result of this new development.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, do we have a way to follow up on this?
We've been out to look at it, and we'll continue to monitor it.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Alvin. A few concerns of the people. Ever since the hurricanes, we have created a problem with the general public, storm victims. And a lot of people have stopped trying to help storm victims because we have a lot of the general public saying that they're from Louisiana, from Gulfport, and it's been a spider web of wondering who put. We have Halloween, we have Christmas, we have New Year, we have Thanksgiving coming up, and you know we don't want to give an ill feeling to those holidays, but we need to have some sort of way of keeping one another separate, but it won't be a lot of confusion. We haven't had no violence as of yet, but with just 3 months left in this year, we don't know what might occur. And I didn't know that we didn't have a self-defense law in place, and a lot of people feel like that the older people have money. And we also know that in the city, you cannot discharge a firearm. So that kind of put everything at risk. Thank you.
Mr. Ashford?
My name is Wilson Ashford. I own and operate Ashford Garage on West Main Street. And I'm not here to give you a hard time. I'm here to ask you not to give me a hard time. What I would like to discuss on this one-way in West Main Street. I can't speak for the church, but the church wasn't informed. The citizens living on those streets wasn't informed. I know the sheriff came by and told me what was happening, and I disagree with it because I don't know of any place, and I don't need to say, let me stand up, please.
That's fine.
I don't know any place, any city, that West Main, or any Main Street is one way. And if you go take a look, when you come out on Cushman Street, trying to get up in this street here, you can't get out. Go to Raymond Street, you can't get out. Go around Ames Street where you're gonna come down on Cushman Street. Now, I know Griffin is building a new building now. They need more room. They're talking about cutting us off over, we can't come up the hill. And First Methodist Church, Blaine Dow's kindergarten, they come to us with. I can't speak for them, but I'm speaking because I know it's gonna be a problem.
I ask you a question.
It's gonna be a problem from the standpoint of traffic, can't get out of that. Also, I don't know of any church in town, including this West Baptist, West Methodist, Second Baptist, Mount Peter, where anything is one way around it. And it's not congested around on West Main Street, as it is anywhere else, as it is right here. That's my comment.
Where Yates Street comes to Greensboro right there, and that's one of the areas that's very difficult to get out of at that particular point. If that were made a four-way stop at that point, would that help to resolve the problem where folks from Griffin could get out from that particular point?
Well, but you're gonna have, the other way, you're gonna have more Griffin getting out of there. Now, my point of view is, it's just not right. I think it'd be a better way.
One of the reasons that we looked at that is that there's gonna be tremendous activity with the new Octavia Hall County Court facility there.
I agree with that.
And we're gonna have people from not necessarily in our city that will be coming out there. And that's already dangerous. If you come up West Main there, you're already entering into the oncoming traffic. I mean, that lane just comes up and you're right there at a bad situation, much less somebody flying around by the electric company where you can't see. And the supervisors were asking us if we would look at that as a spot that would be potentially dangerous for the increased activity on the street. And what I was wondering if it would not be a simple solution to maybe do some four-way stops on Greensboro so that folks can get out from down there. You're exactly right. There is a problem in trying to get out.
But you can imagine when all of those churches turn out, what problem it would be.
I thought it was a problem anyway, whether you had anything else.
What I mean, you say you're gonna eliminate a problem, but you're gonna create one. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I just don't think it's fair. I really don't think, because we had been formed as a church.
The Reverend Jones was informed that we didn't make any
Well, he
move
made,
until he was.
I talked with him, that is a personal decision he made. He said, I was speaking for the church.
I understand.
You understand?
Yes.
And so my point of it is just wrong to treat the citizens that way, because nobody on Cushman Street and Ames Street knew about this. And inform people, the best people in the world to get along with, and we definitely weren't informed.
That's correct. And the only spot that was really going to be affected was at 100 feet of West Main Street. Everything else was going to be staying the same.
I realize you can justify your situation. I just want you to look at our situation.
You have a place of business right there at that point that has to be looked at.
It's gonna affect mine, just like it would be if it was going on your business.
Yes.
That's all.
Understand.
I want you to think about it as you go to bed.
I think that would be the least that we could do is to think about it.
Okay, well, if you do that, that'll be good enough.
Okay, sir.
So I'm pretty sure it's God's direction.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, have we already changed this street to be one-way, or is it just a proposal at this time?
Well, it was, it's left to the chief of police, anything that offers a potential dangerous situation. It does not have to have board approval.
I guess my question is, have we already changed it?
There
or
was
is it still-
process in trying to do this, and the problem in trying to change anything is that you cannot get proper signage on the street to say, suggest that it would be do not enter. And Mr. Hathaway was going to propose putting a sign across the, that particular part behind the electric company to say do not enter on that particular aspect of it. And I believe that is something that the chief of police and some of the staff members can say, take a look at, to make sure that we do not bottleneck traffic. And Mr. Ashford is perfectly correct. You can't get out on Greensboro with the amount of traffic off of Yates Street right there. It's very difficult.
Mr. Mayor, am I correct that, for the record, you do support this change to the one-way from the top of Chester, from the top of West Main at Chester's Clinic going west down to the property line of the Justice Complex? So
That's correct. That here again, I'd like to restate that you've got so many people that will be going to court there that are unfamiliar with the traffic patterns of the situation. And if any of you in this room were to go up that street, you kind of take a gasp in that you're going into an entering traffic lane, and it's coming straight at you.
And the police department does support and recommend this change, Mr. Mayor?
Is Mr. Lindley here? Am I not correct about that, Mr. Lindley?
Your Honor, I can see both sides of the issue.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, Board, I hope that we'll give serious consideration to what Mr. Wilson Ashford said to us tonight. a lifelong member of this community, a businessman for more years than I know about, a longtime member of the Board of Trustees of the Municipal Separate School District, speaking for the residents and church congregations of that area. Let's take a very, very careful look at this situation.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
since I am the alderman in question here and in discussing this with the pastor of Griffin and going to Mr. Ashford and discussing this with him, the only thing that I had in mind, and it was not to create a problem for anyone, but for the safety of the citizens of Starkville. That was the only reason that I entertained this when it was brought forth by the Board of Supervisors. And that is why, because I'm concerned about the safety of the citizens coming up that hill out into Main Street. And if any of you have gone that way or come that way, you know that it's a very dangerous intersection there. And that was the only reason that I considered that. And I told Mr. Ashford why. I explained to him that we could try it, and if it is going to create a problem, then we can always revisit it. But I thought we could at least try it, because all it takes is one fatality there, and then we'll say, well, why didn't we do something about this? And that's why. So I'll take the blame for this.
I would suggest that all the people go up that way, try to get on Main Street. Try it.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I support my colleague from Ward 7, and certainly you have to look at it from a safety point of view. And I will say to my colleagues here that I did talk with Reverend Jones, who is the pastor of the Griffin United Methodist Church, and he did not express any objections or any reservations about one-waying the street for this narrow area in question. And so he basically expressed full support of it. So I'm in support of it. You know, anything that espouses safety, you know, we need to do it. I understand in talking with the mayor that that this was conferred with the police department. I think Chief Leland was out, but it went through the proper channels and was communicated with the city engineer. So, you know, sometimes we just have to do things that promote safety. You know, these decisions we make a lot of times are not easy. And I made tough decisions sitting at this board over 12 years, so I support that. And like the mayor said, that we're going to have a lot of traffic going that would have attempted to go back up the hill in an easterly direction, and it's just going to pose a lot of problems. One way in this area, in my opinion, provides outlets where the traffic can have ingress and egress. I've gone through there a lot of times over the last several days. Even at the Ashford Garage, the traffic can go from the garage back to the left around Ames Street, and the Griffin traffic on a weeknight or Sunday still will not be impeded from the access to the church. The traffic can come in from off of Greensburg and come in off of Long Street. And that portion will not be one-way. The one-way street will not be taken down to the four-way stop. So I think in the long run, we're going to see some safety measures. My colleague from Ward 7 is correct on this issue. I support her on this. And this matter has gone through the staff on this. And so I suggest that we proceed with this, and we'll see how it works. And if it's a matter that's going to cause some irreparable harm, then we can revisit it. So I think that this is all in good candor. We need to move on, and let's just see how this is going to work. Yes, sir, Chief.
I was just gonna say, to further what y'all are saying, we try not to drive the patrol cars up the hill to come out on Lane because it's so difficult. And, you know, we avoid that intersection. I myself don't come that way. So, it has been a problem over the years.
That's the reason I challenged everybody to try it.
Mr. Mayor, with all due respect to both of my colleagues that have expressed their opinion, this is the first I've heard about it tonight. I mean, I came up that hill this morning, and I asked myself, when we one-way it? And my question is, since we're one-waying it back to the west, I saw,
Right.
where are we pushing all that traffic to? And I wish the Lewigs were still here, because his point about trying to get traffic off of Greensboro Street, are we not, in effect, just putting more traffic onto what we consider an already overloaded street in the first place?
Well, on Greensboro, there's an awful lot of traffic that comes and turns on Raymond to West Main to get to Long Street. Tremendous amount.
Right.
And what this does, this pushes the traffic, a lot of it straight to Long Street, that's going down Raymond to West Main to Long. That church lot in the back, I don't know how many of them of the Methodist Church enter off of the east part of West Main. I would suggest that probably a lot of them come up Yates Street, which is very difficult to get on to Greensboro at that particular point. But we have, as of yet, had the effect of all the court and the county's court system to be added to go back up the street in the one-way scenario.
So when we add that, we're going to flush them west and onto Greensboro, a majority of that back onto Greensboro Street again?
That or Long Street Highway Old 182. That is two-way that way.
Mr. Mayor,
I mean, like I said, this is the first I've heard of it, so these are just questions that are coming
Right,
to my
good
mind.
questions.
And, I think that those issues bear some serious study. Like I said, I mean, we're talking about trying to get traffic off of Greensboro Street, specifically named in the comprehensive plan, and yet, you know, we're doing things which potentially could add more traffic to that.
Well, I mean, either way, something, if you put traffic going the other way, if you try to add a whole line of traffic trying to get up on the east part right there, you've got a scenario there that's going to be very difficult.
Right, and I guess my comment is that it would have been nice to at least know about it, and maybe, you know, these are both difficult issues on both ends of the street, no pun intended.
Right,
But,
I understand.
You know, it would have been nice to have some input into this decision-making process, I guess is all I'd say.
Well, the way it was explained to me 20 years ago when I woke up on the street and we had no parking signs in the whole area there, I was told it wasn't a thing I could do about it or the board could do about it. It was they considered it to be a safety issue. When it comes to safety issues, the direct decision by the police department is what flies. And I assume that has not changed in the last 20 years.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I think the best thing to do is move on to our agenda. Let's go ahead and continue with the decision been made. We're going to let the request the police chief to monitor it, and if you see any potential problem, you report back. So
I think that's probably a good idea.
Yes, sir. I'd like
To
go on the
continue
next
to
item.
monitor
Yes, sir.
the issue.
And let's go ahead and proceed with the one-way street.
All right, do we have other citizens?
Mr. Mayor and Board of Aldermen, I'm Patrick Bourdin, 207 Loomis Street. A couple of months ago, I presented the University Drive bike lane project to you guys. And I'd like to express my gratitude for the implementation of the bike lanes. I ride my bike every day to work, and I think every one of us has seen how successful the bike lanes have been and the number of cyclists that have decided to use the bike lanes. I do have one safety concern, however, with parking and possibly the lack of enforcement of parking on the bike lanes. There are several times where there are a number of cars parked in the bike lanes, and from the way that Bill Webb designed the bike lane, it's wide, the street is wide enough for car traffic, but if cars are parked in the bike lanes, it's not wide enough for motor traffic and cycle traffic as well. I'd like to see a more strict enforcement of the parking ordinances on University Drive.
Thank you. Pastor Clyde.
5 Williams. One light and one heavy. I've lived in this town 37 years, and I've waited 37 years to see Douglas MacArthur's name spelled correctly on signs on Douglas MacArthur Drive. If the city in its tight budgetary situation can't afford to spell the name correctly, get the signs replaced, maybe we can take up a collection and get it done right. I don't want to live another 37 years to see the good general's name continue to be misspelled. It's an embarrassment. Let's get it straightened out. That's the light. The heavy, I find that, and Mr. McLean's comment plus the comment in the newspaper today raised several issues in my mind. Prominently as a former bureaucrat who had to deal with several $25 to $30 million of federal money, I find it almost inconceivable that you can budget accurately and well when you have no meaningful updated policy on matters such as fuel consumption and allocation of public vehicles for what essentially is private use. And I would like to see, following up on Mr. McLean's comment, that certainly before this time next year, before any kind of budgetary action takes place, that the city looks systematically at what these vehicles are used for, since people, police for example, who live outside the city have no jurisdiction outside the city as far as I know other than hot pursuit. What kind of deterrent factor, what kind of response factor is really there? Let's look at some meaningful, rational ways of allocating vehicles, being sure that the allocation of vehicles is not counted as a fringe benefit, which is taxable, in this case to police officers. And be sure, too, that persons who need to have access to these vehicles have them. So that, for example, if someone from the water department, the sewer department, the electric department has to drive a private vehicle in town to get public vehicle in order to get to an emergency, that's a waste of time. That person should be on the list for having access to public vehicles 24 hours a day. Please let us do something systematic and rational and get this straightened out, and that should be a part of your discussion on Roman 10, A, and C this evening. I'm sorry I'm not going to be here to listen to that, but I do hope that we'll have an opportunity as a public to look very carefully at the facts about the use of these vehicles. Also, as part of that, use of the vehicles will determine the replacement of the vehicles. If we don't have a systematic, regular rotation for replacing these vehicles, we should have such a plan in mind. I have seen no systematic plan other than you just replace them at X number of miles and have to replace 46 police vehicles at one time. We do it rather than rotate into a systematic way based on maintenance records and actual use. Thank you.
Next.
I'm Susan Shapley, 2603 Maple Drive, as some of you have the misfortune to know. Mr. Mayor and Board, my last appearance before the board was April 19th, 2005. I had printed you all a copy of what I read that night and a copy of the letter that I wrote to the previous mayor the next morning. At the first meeting of this current board, I did not speak, but I did personally invite several of you to come look at the situation on Maple Drive. To my knowledge, none of you has taken the time to do so. On August the 29th, my house flooded 3 times. Twice, the water was wind-driven by Katrina, but if the drainage situation had been corrected prior to that, it would not have been sufficient for the wind to push into my house. The third time was just the routine flooding that I had come to expect when we had any significant amount of rain. September 25th, thanks to Rita, I flooded again. The show and tell is just a small part of what I'm enduring. Yes, the encyclopedias are old, but I have continued the yearbooks, and as I'm not a real computer person, I still use them occasionally. The bookcase that they were sitting on was already 4 inches off the floor. It's a built-in, it was 4 inches up. The insulation in the bag is just a sample of what I have pulled. Most of my baseboards now need a complete refinishing. I guess the final straw was the fact that I took my dog to the vet. He had developed an allergy that the vet said could be due to mold in the walls or the carpet that I hadn't gotten out of the house yet. When linoleum in the kitchen was coming up, I decided I'd pull up the loose strips. There's mold on the floor under the linoleums. You know, this is this board's first round of the whole board with this. I just want to know if the city is going to do something, or should I do like my son say and just give up and seek recourse somewhere else? And I know that's not up for discussion tonight, if y'all would just please see what you can do.
Thank you,
My
ma'am.
mom's sick, I've got to get back to see her. You can throw the encyclopedias in the garbage, because that's all they're good for.
Good evening, my name is Ron William, I live in the Rock Hill community on Butler Road, right after Butler. We've been trying to get help to get a road fixed, but the city had taken over out there. I drive school bus to Starkville School. I take my bus home, there's no way I can get my bus to or my own vehicle car. And they had said that they were going to approve, had adopted this road out in Hendricks Road, but we can't get no help. You get try to get emergency vehicle if somebody gets sick, you can't. They had an officer come up there and just really get up there to try to solve the problem. I'm trying to get some help in repairing this road. City's taking over the road.
What's the name of your road again?
It's Hendricks.
Hendricks Road.
Yeah.
Mr. Williams,
Yeah.
you know, we've had numerous conversations, and I'm very sympathetic and respectful to the situation here. The board is, I've discussed with you and the other residents, and of course this is my ward, that the board took action some years or months, and numerous months ago with regard to helping residents in the annexed area. And the motion that was adopted by this board provided that the residents who live on these roads would have to convey an area in question as determined by our city engineer by virtue of a warranty deed conveying the property to us. You know, and once that area in question to make a roadway is conveyed to the city by a warranty deed, and your lawyer would have to do a title search, then we would accept the title to that property. Then that road, once it's formally acceptance by the city, becomes a public road. Now, that's the same way we did with Geechee Road, we did that with Cedar Creek Lane, and we are proposing to do the same thing with your road. Now, you have, to my understanding, employed a local attorney here, and I have even mentioned to a lot of the residents who live on Hendricks and Treasure that the only thing that the attorney got to do is just give us a warranty deed with a legal description there specifying the area that is determined by our city engineer to be wide enough to do that. Now, see, and let me be real brief here. I'm trying to help, you know, so we get this done.
I understand.
Okay.
We already did that. We signed everything for the lawyer. So in other words, he hadn't brought it to you all.
Okay, listen to me real good. Now, it's not our responsibility, and I want to see the road become
You ever
city.
tried to go up that road?
No, listen to me, Mr. Williams. I'm not trying to be facetious or give you a hard time. What I'm saying is the lawyer, your attorney needs to give us a deed.
That's what I'm asking. He hadn't did that because we paid all that, had everything checked out, signed everything over, and he still hadn't brought it to you all. That's what you're saying.
Well, we haven't seen it. It's not our fault or our responsibility.
No, I didn't say it was your fault. I'm just asking, have you received?
No, sir. I've inquired about it numerous times. What you and the other people who have paid him to do need to say, Mr. Attorney, the city of Starkville needs a warranty deed with a legal description conveying the property portion. And I'll make the motion that we formally accept it. I mean, I've been trying to get this into the city for.
See, that's what I said. We all have signed that.
Right. It's just a lack of understanding, and make things move a little faster here. Just let your lawyer know, we need a warranty deed. I've been telling the residents there forever, and I want to see us maintain it. I mean, but I can't do anything on private property out there. And so, but as soon as we can get a warranty deed, we're gonna treat that road just like we've done Geechee Road, just like we've done Cedar Creek Lane, and just like any other roads that we have accepted in the index area. But we got to have, so if you sign something there, we need a warranty deed. I don't know what you saying.
We've signed for the warranty deed and everything. He came by, they paid, they had the property, whatever had to be done to it. I'm just saying, he hadn't brought it to you, so I'm thinking that he had brought it to you.
No, sir, we haven't gotten it. Just shake back with him. You know, we mean well, and I'm gonna make the motion, we're gonna accept it, but we got to have that warranty deed, because right now, that property is considered as private, and the law prohibits us from doing that. But just check with him, and we're gonna do that, because the order's already in the minutes. The minutes are real clear that once we get the warranty deed, and there's formal acceptance by the city, then that road becomes a public road, and we can maintain it, okay? But just check with him, and we'll do it, okay? And I'm all in favor of doing that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? This brings us down to mayor's business, and we took off of the consent agenda the OCEDA budget, and Mr. Wallace, if you'd like to come up and
Thank you. I'm Jack Wallace with the Arkansas County Economic Development Authority, and with me is David Cornell, who's president of the Greater Starkville Development Partnership. And if you have a real important question you need an intelligent answer, he'll do it. So, thank you for your time, Mayor, Board. You should have in your packet our proposed budget that we've adopted 2 weeks ago, that was approved by the County Board of Supervisors yesterday in their regular scheduled meeting. According to the legislature that created us in 1984, we are obligated to come to you and to the county for formal approval of our budget each year, which we've always done. The budget you see is a zero budget in the amount of $733,660.23. 20% of the revenue of that $733,000 is our portion of the 2% food and beverage tax, which we estimate to be about $150,000. Half of our budget is our lease and reimbursement revenue for our building that we own. That's about $351,000 of income. The other 30% is from 2 sources. One is the balance of a ARC grant that we had for Cornerstone that to date has a balance of about $132,000 in round figures. We will collect that very soon, pass it right on into our final payment to our contractor for the work that's been done in Cornerstone. In fact, we have to add some to it in order to complete the project. And the rest of that 30% is 2 sources. One is yours and one is the county. Each of you pay into OCEDA, passes through us to repay a TBA loan that created service zone. You pay us about $48,000 a year in round figures. County pays us $48,000 a year. We in turn around and pay the TBA loan with those 2 sources of funds. It's an exact wipeout. You might be interested to know that your investment in service zone, which is now Client Logic, today, and David can correct me, but I think there's about 900 employees. They're the second largest employer in Arkansas County today. So that's been a good investment on your part and everybody in the county's part. So in our budget, we will do 2 things. We're going to pay for our management contract, which is for the Vice President of Property Development, our portion of an accountant, our portion of a receptionist, and our portion of a communications director. That amounts to about $101,000 a year. The rest of it is like our normal legal fees, audit fees, and the maintenance of the shrubs and streets. And that we have as a bare minimum this year of $50,000. And in addition to that, we have carved out the $50,000 that will require for us to pay our note on the $500,000 loan at Cornerstone, which we made about a year ago. So we're going to take in a roughly, as close as we can estimate, $733,000 and certainly expend it. We're hoping that we do not have any unforeseen expenses hit us because we do not have any discretionary pot to pull it from at this point in time. Cornerstone, for your information and a report to you, we're about 98% through with that contract that will bring 100 acres of land ready to be used with the exception of sewer and water. We do have electricity. And in the research park, we're now sitting with 2 available lots for sale and the 80 acres that is yet to be developed. We struggled for 2.5 years with Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality and EPA to finally identify the brown spot, which is the old landfill at Mississippi State University. We think we're within about 2 months of that conclusion. We think it will amount to about 10 to 12 acres, probably a maximum of 12. And in that area, we cannot use it for a building site or any permanent permanent structure, but we will be able to use it for other uses. And we've said publicly before, we are looking at any kind of recreational use that we might make out of that 10 or 12 acres. And we intend to mix that into our park anyway, because it is certainly a part of today's parks. So we're looking forward to getting clearance and identification and requirements that NBEQ is going to place on us to use the land. Probably we're looking at some kind of clay field over this site and et cetera. And so we really don't know yet. We do have a projected street outline and a projected lot design in that area if and when we are able to identify the exact number of acres to set aside. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have and would ask your approval of our budget for the coming year.
Any board members have questions? Do I hear a motion that we approve their budget?
So moved.
We have a second. We have a motion to approve their budget with a second. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Board.
This brings us down to, for authorization, extension of the emergency status for the city of Starkville. We've been doing that on a week-by-week basis.
Mr. Mayor and Board, to facilitate any claim for reimbursement for expenses related to hurricanes, tornadoes, and so forth, and to take other necessary action that might be appropriate to deal with the lingering effect within the city of weather problems, I would move that we extend the local emergency for an additional block of time, that being 7 days.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor, please raise your hands. 6-1. All those opposed? 1. Very good. This brings us down to a proclamation of September the 23rd as the Red Cross Volunteer Appreciation Day. And the proclamation by the mayor and the city of Starkville, Mississippi. The Starkville chapter of the Red Cross and its volunteers have served the city of Starkville in times of need. And let me tell you what, they have done that. Hereas the Starkville chapter of the Red Cross and its volunteers have provided emergency relief to the citizens of Starkville and the volunteers of the Hurricane Katrina disaster. Hereas the Starkville Red Cross and its volunteers have given countless hours to the suffering that is caused by the Hurricane Katrina disaster. Hereas the Red Cross and its volunteers have provided counseling and funding and guidance with obtaining governmental assistance for relief from the Hurricane Katrina disaster. Whereas the Red Cross and its volunteers have fed and sheltered hundreds of disaster relief victims. Whereas the city of Starkville is deeply grateful for the dedication, the generosity of the Red Cross volunteers in their efforts to provide for the fellow man in times of need. Now, therefore, I, Robert D. Camp, Mayor of Starkville, Mississippi, do hereby proudly proclaim September the 23rd, 2005 as Red Cross Volunteer Appreciation Day, and urge all citizens of Starkville to join together in showing their appreciation for the outstanding achievements of the Red Cross volunteers. And witness of, and I have hereunto set my hand and seal for the great city of Starkville, Mississippi, to be affixed this, the 23rd day of September 2005. Robert D. Camp. And we have the chairman tonight here to accept this of the local chapter of the American Red Cross. We appreciate all of y'all's diligence in your work, and it was really wonderful to see your dedication and everything that you did for this city and this area. Thank you very much.
Jim, thank you.
We would like to have, I would like to recommend to the board that we take Mr. Richard Corey, and to suggest that with the board's permission and a motion that we let him be our GTEC or GTEC board liaison for the city. And I would entertain a motion at this time for that appointment. No, I haven't.
Say a word. Mr. Mayor and Board, I will move that Alderman Richard Corey be appointed as the board's representative to the GTEC organization.
We have a second. Those in favor of that motion, any discussion?
I'd just like to say I'd be honored to.
Excellent. We thought maybe you might like that. All those in favor of that, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Of course, we'll get through this meeting, I might want. We need to have authorization for the city to provide services to the POPs on the Plaza event sponsored by NBC. I think that process is going on, and we would be a little bit late if we do approve that, but I would entertain a motion that we provide services for that function. I'm sure that we're already providing services for
I
it.
suspect that it's over now.
Yeah, probably so.
What did we provide?
What did we provide, David?
Probably took about 2 police officers.
Okay.
Just some traffic control and street type of things.
Not a very rowdy crowd.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval.
We have a second. We have a motion with a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It passes. We will now take a 10-minute recess before we get into the board business.
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your health care needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in health care.
Report on the fuel conservation policy goal of 10% reduction in the citywide fuel consumption.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Board, we were tasked, or I was tasked, and I passed it on downhill, last board meeting to come forward with a recommendation for the goal of reduction of fuel consumption citywide, citywide vehicles of approximately 10%, and I understood it to be a goal, but in some cases we certainly hoped we would go beyond that. I find in looking at the numbers, and we did do some number crunching, I'll give Doug Devlin credit for a lot of that. He pulled out the graph that you have in front of you. I think you have a spreadsheet in front of you showing May through September fuel usage. And I asked Doug if we could go back any further and take a look at that and get a good idea over the years how that had gone. And he said no, that really our best numbers were the ones that started in May of this year, so we're going to have to take a go-forward position from May to begin the analysis. I think a lot of our numbers, if you will look at I think there should be a graph in front of you as well showing the overall citywide consumption is the top line with below that the 3 largest users of fuel are police, the sanitation, and the streets. And you'll see those below you coded in pink, yellow, and blue. I think we have kind of skewed results because of Katrina, and obviously Katrina started our concerns over fuel consumption, which is a good thing, but it also skews our ability to determine exactly what our savings would be. Because some of it spanned August, which had a very large spike, and then it moved into September some, which has a rather dramatic drop. And my hope is that the drop that we see in September is going to be reflective that it will continue down for October, because September also included a lot of our extracurricular activities that would increase our fuel consumption in response to Katrina and Rita. So essentially you have in front of you a number of responses from the department heads indicating what they were doing. Regarding fuel conservation, sanitation, Sharon is not going to, or Ms. Boyd's trucks are not going to the landfill unless they're completely full. The chief Lindley is, they're not running the cars unless they're running the lights. I mean, there's just a number of small things that we might not consider that they do as department heads that are making a difference. And we'll give Chief Lindley credit. He has reduced, and his numbers show August to September, a reduction of 19-point-something%. And his is in mileage, so that's, that indicates, as opposed to fuel consumption, that indicates that he really is conserved, at least in mileage driven. And I think we'll be able to achieve some more measures that we'll be able to get a better measure off of. And I propose to, if not come back before the board in this formal way, at least on a monthly basis, report to you as we begin to look at this, how we're achieving this goal. And if the board wants us to come back and report, obviously in a formal manner, we can do that, but I certainly will provide the board information on a monthly basis when those numbers are concluded. And part of what I wanted to do, you'll find later on under the Department of Business, you will see that the Electric Department and the Sanitation Department are requesting authorization to make purchases associated with what is in your blue packet here, which is the energy cell. Chief Grantham did an experiment with these energy cells on his fire trucks and achieved what I can only say would be remarkable results, and the chief is here to speak to it if you wish. He had 32% and 33% and a 47% fuel conservation results, and so that's the reason, that's the genesis of why we felt like the Sanitation Department and Electric Department would benefit. And if we get even, I projected numbers that if we get even just a 20% savings or a 15% savings, that these fuel cells, assuming that we make a purchase of them, will save us within 6 months to 7 months, they will save us the cost of the outlay. And then, I don't know, I did not read the paperwork on if it had an expected life, if the fuel, the energy.
Lifetime warranty, you move
That's what I
one
thought,
vehicle
yeah.
to another.
Yeah, I thought I remember that. So it's one of those things that will go on saving us money in the long run. So bottom line is, you certainly ask whatever questions you will, but I think, the results at this point for 10% are inconclusive based on the spike in August and the Katrina response and the Rita response. But we will continue to monitor and provide data as we go along and can determine exactly what we have saved.
Thank you. Do any of the alderpersons have questions?
Just to be clear, that when we passed this 10% reduction, we were basing it off of the months of May through July, which was an average of 14,573. And if we use that 10% reduction, it came up with a fuel consumption target of 13,116. And of course, September, we can't even count it because we didn't act on this until the 20th. So that would be the target number that we'd be looking for in October. And I think, the graph is fantastic, and then perhaps we can just have a goal
Sure.
line.
We'll have a continuation, but without the data from last year, for example, it's hard to say what's going to be a norm for us. And with
Right.
Rita and Katrina kicking in, it makes it a little difficult to do, but we'll continue to monitor. And I think we have some real opportunities to make some savings, and we might even be, with this energy cell business, we might even be leading in the state and provide a good test case for those folks. So we will see.
Very good. This brings us down to the approval of an amendment to the ordinance increasing the citywide parking fines. David, is that one of yours? Judges?
We've discussed it as far as it's part of the increase in fines citywide because it hasn't been done in some time. Mr. Favor, of course, is the prosecutor, he and Judge Ishii researched this, and as the city moves forward and trying, have you know?
No, yes. I was going to see if he was going to take credit for it. He's sitting there shaking and said no.
Excuse me, I know they've done traffic fines, and I thought parking were part of it.
We have done traffic fines.
We've done traffic, but apparently parking is not. I apologize.
Allow me to take credit or responsibility for this particular element. I discussed it with the folks in the traffic area, and we pulled the ordinance, which you'll find in your packets, where the city set the fines in 1992 or 3, I believe it was. So it's been quite some time since we've done anything about it. And based on that, and based on my discussions with the court folks, we increased them appropriately for what we felt would be a more deterrent than the $5 that it currently is.
Mr. Slater, can you prepare an amendment to this ordinance?
I just saw this for the first time this day. And I can state that Judge Ishii have not seen this either. We're not aware of these particular numbers. We had some different recommendations.
Well, I inquired from Judge Ishii, and the folks in his office said that, you know, I provided that to them, and she said that he had no particular input to provide me, and so we sat there and.
Who was that told you? Told you Judge Ishii had no input on the fines?
No, I asked her would he comment on it, and she said that she had talked with him and he didn't have any recommendations to make.
He absolutely has recommendations to make.
Okay, then I did not get.
I spoke to him myself.
Okay, then I did not get that information, and if he wishes to provide more information, then that was where it came from.
Well, let's keep this simple. I move we take the question of an ordinance increasing citywide parking fines under advisement until the recess meeting of this month. And of course, remember that because they were originally set by ordinance, we're going to have to do an ordinance amendment. But I would recommend, Mr. Faber, of course, that amendment then let them be set by board order as opposed to amendment of an ordinance each time.
Do we have a second to that?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor, please raise your hands. It looks like it's 100%. Brings us down to discuss consideration of the assigned city vehicular policy. Mr. Cox, is this not your?
It is indeed. And of course, we've heard a few citizen comments tonight, and we've received letters, et cetera, and it seemed to make sense for this board to speak clearly on the issue and to move on. Obviously, this issue has a budgetary impact with gas at $3 a gallon and climbing. It's probably also one of tax fairness, and the issue is allowing city-owned vehicles to be taken home at night to homes outside the city. And we're talking about potentially funding through taxpayer dollars approximately anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 of basically what amounts to be personal commuting expenses. When you look at this from an IRS standpoint, they speak very clearly. Commuting is always a personal, non-business expense. Commuting meaning going from your home to your workplace, from your workplace to home. And there's been some confusion around this issue because we've said that, in fact, that's not the case because people are on call. The IRS has also spoken very clearly about what represents on call. And they say if there are no restrictions on an employee on call other than the duty to report to work if they are reached, then there will be personal use involved in essence of their commuting for those take-home vehicles. I want to be clear, though, that what we're talking about is not an appropriateness of a take-home fleet. That's not what I'm discussing tonight. I believe we've already heard very clearly from department heads of the benefits of a take-home fleet in previous board meetings. But here, where do we go from here? We need to move forward to address the use of public funds as it relates to taking city vehicles outside the city into the county. And we're also dealing with the realities of cars that, in essence, have already been provided. And so I believe a common sense compromise, and one, frankly, that's supported around the country as they have come up with policies as it relates to take-home vehicles, would be for employees who use city-owned vehicles for commuting purposes to reimburse the city for those personal commuting miles. In other words, they would be able to keep the vehicles for their use as well as for the employer's use, but they would reimburse us for their personal commuting miles. It's called the Government U.S. General Services Administration puts together a mileage reimbursement rate for all of the government, and it's currently set at 48.5 cents a mile. That fully costs the use of that vehicle for personal use. It includes a factor for fuel, maintenance, insurance, and depreciation, and it's frequently updated. And that's one of the nice things about using a government standard for the reimbursement of this personal commuting miles is because they will update that and they will continue to update that. And in fact, it's just recently, let's see, this was dated September 1st of 2005, 48.5 cents. And it's gone up and down over time, and that's why it's probably a fair standard. But again, I think we should be on record. We should provide clear direction. I'm offering a common sense compromise. This is not to end the take-home fleet. In fact, it's very different from that. It's just a way for us to reimburse the city for personal commuting miles, and I'd like to make that in the form of a motion that we require effective November 1st, employees who use city-owned vehicles for commuting purposes to reimburse the city for those personal miles using the U.S. General Services Administration reimbursement rate of 48.5 cents, which would be modified as the GSA changes.
All of you have heard the motion. Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. The floor is now open for discussion.
Mr. Mayor, a couple of comments dealing with the tax issue, specifically talking about police cars, since it seems to be a hot topic. IRS Publication 525 titled Qualified Non-Personal Use Vehicles expressly provides that the value of such vehicles need not be included as personal income. It excludes the personal use of such vehicle from income on the basis that either the vehicle is perceived as a, quote, working condition fringe benefit and therefore tax exempt, or is a very small fringe benefit, end quote. IRS Regulation 1.274I defines a qualified non-personal use vehicle as one that by its nature or design is unlikely to be used for personal purposes. Section 1.274-5T K2 subsection 2 subsection A specifies that a clearly marked police vehicle is a qualified non-personal use vehicle. As such, there is no income tax consequence to officers or chiefs that have take-home marked vehicles. As far as the reimbursement of city employees reimbursing the city back for this use, and off the top of my head, it would seem to me that we would be admitting that we are making an illegal donation that we are requiring people to pay back, which is illegal on the face of it. So we can't require them to pay us back for something that's illegal in the first place, because then we are responsible for allowing them an improper benefit. Now, I personally don't think it is an improper benefit for them to have use of those vehicles, because we hired them to do a job which would require employees to have use of those vehicles in the service of their duties coming back into town. What we're talking about, if we take away the vehicles, which I understand and appreciate Mr. Cox's comments about, you know, not wanting to do that, would be a decrease in the level of public services we provide to our citizenry. If we don't want people in city employ living outside of the city, that's an entirely different issue, because that gets to a residency issue and whether or not we should force all municipal employees to live within the corporate limits of the city of Starkville. I don't favor that either, because we've already changed that. We've been down that road, and you run into a lot of problems finding qualified and certified people to fill a variety of positions within the city. So with all that said, I would say that we need to just stay the course on what we're doing, and I appreciate the concerns brought by my colleagues, but you know, if we'd like to talk about cost effectiveness, I mean, I've also got studies over here that show that personally assigned police vehicles are 70% cheaper to operate than pool vehicles, and that takes into account repairs, parts, maintenance, and if you like a copy of the data, I can provide that as well. But once again, I'd like to say that I think we just need to, we do need to make a clear statement, and that's that we're going to continue in the same way in which we are operating now, and I would urge my colleagues to vote this motion down, and we proceed with the outstanding service that our city employees are providing to our citizens.
talking about before, I think we're clouding the issue when we talk about the effectiveness of a take-home fleet. That's not being discussed. We're clouding the issue, and it is correct that these are qualified non-personal vehicles. However, the IRS is pretty specific that that vehicle cannot be used for personal purposes other than commuting. And then later, commuting is always a personal, non-business expense. So what I'm suggesting is not to cloud the issue with questions of an effectiveness of a take-home fleet, not to cloud the issue about whether it makes sense for us to have city-owned vehicles taken home at night within the city. What we're specifically talking about and looking for a common sense compromise around is the issue of taking city-owned vehicles, and this is happening across all departments, so I think it clouds the issue when we're discussing one department, that are taken outside of the city. And it seems to me that it's reasonable, if this is indeed a personal commuting expense, that we would ask those individuals to reimburse us. We are not talking about going back to a fleet system. They don't have to turn back in their cars, yet if they're using this for personal commuting business or non-business, then they would reimburse us. It's not an insignificant amount of money, but I am perfectly comfortable, and I'll ask for a roll call vote for us to speak on this issue, and if it's the will of the board to continue to encourage, by paying for the commuting of these employees to no longer live in the city, but to live in the county, and we'll subsidize that. I'm comfortable with that because I have one vote here on the board, but I think it's important that we do speak, and I think it's important that we move from this issue on to other city business.
Mr. Mayor, may I provide just a little more information, just if, kind of FY, please? We researched the minutes that authorized the take-home vehicles was month of September the 21st, 1992, and it had the list of the folks that were authorized to do that, the entire list there, fire department, the electric department, building codes, etc. And what I wanted to do is just provide you the information relative to other departments. We have 2 from the water department that at any one time would be out of the city, 2 from the fire department that at any one time would be out of the city, 13 from the police department, and 4 from the electric department, for a total out of the city of approximately 21 vehicles at any one given time. And then there are some other, I think, perhaps, I had the graph or the chart that I believe Mr. Mills put together regarding the number of folks who lived outside the city and the county, and an updated, more correct list of the number would be 13 as opposed to, I didn't count how many we had here, but there's a slightly fewer number because some of the addresses needed to be updated. And then the mileage would differ based on, rather than 365 days a year working, the appropriate amount of working time, because they don't work, 365 days out of the year. So some of those numbers would change, but just to give you information, that is the water department, the electric department, et cetera, as Mr. Cox, as Alderman Cox had mentioned.
We've heard arguments on both sides of the issue. Yes.
No, I was telling him that you wanted
I
to
saw his
speak.
finger pointing at me.
I'd like just to go for the record, that I have been asked by a lot of the citizens of Starkville to look into the situation of carrying cars outside the city limits, carrying them home. I did that by obtaining information from the records of the city here in the administration. I compiled a mileage list, which compiled a usage, and I did basically what I thought was the right thing to do. And in turns, I have talked to several of the aldermen, and I guess I'm disappointed in some of the aldermen because they have basically made this as a political issue. That's their privilege, that's their right. But it's one other item I would like to inject to this, that I have been accused by different people, being, one is the city administrator, that I have targeted the police department. I have a vendetta against the police department, and I've had accusations by the editor of Starkville Daily News of the same thing, of slipping around, taking pictures of the police cars at their home. I can truthfully say tonight, I could not go to one of these policemen's home outside the city limits. But above all, I resent those type of allegations. They are uncalled for. It's not business. And the thing that people do not understand that I am 100% for the police department, for the administration, and I had the opportunity today for me and the chief of police to sit down. I don't suppose some people believe that, but me and him sat down and talked about things at the police department, and we come up with the same thing we have for years, that we are in agreement on most things. We disagree, but we don't walk around making accusations against each other. And I want it documented that the accusation has been against me. I totally resent. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, just one comment. My colleagues from Ward 1 and 5, of course, have talked about potential IRS implications of certain actions and so forth. I would simply add not to the IRS discussion that the matter of who takes home vehicles, how far they take them, exactly what is done is well established as a Board of Aldermen prerogative by opinions of the Attorney General and letters of the State Department of Audit. So it is a board decision regardless of any IRS implications. And of course, the state of Mississippi has gone somewhat further in that, in Attorney General's opinions, by essentially saying that as far as they're concerned, there are no IRS implications in some of the fashions that have been mentioned tonight.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion on the floor that has been asked that we have a roll call vote for this. And I will start at Sumner Davis is in. And how do you vote with the motion, Mr. Davis?
Nay.
Mrs. Self?
Nay.
Mr. Corey?
Nay.
Mr. Mills? Mr.
McAlpin? No.
No. Mr. Cox?
Yes. Mr. Perkins?
Nay.
I like that show on the hand. So it fails by 5-2, I believe. You want to repeat who voted what, Candy? Motion fails. It moves us to recommend a reorganization of certain functions of the City Hall. I think that you chaired that committee, was not Mr. McAlpin. You made it right.
I don't doubt it. Mr. Mayor and Board, the Organization and Operations Committee of the city met recently to discuss, in our first meeting, to discuss a number of issues that concerned us and appear to concern both employees of the city as well as the general public. Primary among the things discussed was, of course, the new phone system and whether or not a citizen should be greeted with a recorded message saying punch this and punch that and punch the other and all that type of thing. What happens when a citizen comes into City Hall, and of course you can think about that logically. If you were a citizen, you come in the door, you look to the left and it says police. You say, I don't want any part of the police. So you look to the right and it says city clerk's office with big open glass doors. And so logically, if you don't know where you're going or where the person you want to see might have an office or anything of that sort, you're going to turn right. and there's a counter there and so forth. Well, of course, continuous disruptions of walk-ins affects operations within the city clerk's office. We have the mayor and board's administrative assistant and the dozens of people each day that are directed down the hall, and they look to the left and they see a window that looks sort of like a teller window down there, and then down at the other end of the hall. But nevertheless, they'll turn right and ask the administrative assistant, is this where I pay my court fine? You know, and all this stuff just goes on and on and on, and we waste so much time and energy attempting to respond to the needs of our citizens. That should be our primary concern. Their needs, what they want to accomplish, should be addressed as efficiently as possible by those in City Hall and, of course, in outlying buildings where public might go at a particular time. All of this was discussed, debated back and forth, pros, cons, and nothing is 100% perfect. But the Organization and Operation Committee comes to you tonight with a specific recommendation, and this recommendation has 5 parts, all of which are interrelated. 5 parts. The first of these is that there should be employed by the city a receptionist for City Hall. We want citizens to be greeted by a pleasant, smiling face and someone with the ability to direct them to the places they need to go or provide information about whatever brings them up the steps of City Hall. Likewise, we want a pleasant voice to answer the city telephone. Nothing is more irritating to people, and I beg your pardon.
I just have a question. Are you moving on to recommendation 2, or is this all part of recommendation?
This is all recommendation 1. I will enumerate them, Alderman
Okay.
Davis, so you can keep
No,
up.
I'm trying my best. Thank you.
So we want a pleasant voice to answer the phone. All of you have had experience where you call a number and you either immediately rolled into voicemail or you're given a menu with 49 things to punch, and it takes you all the time to go through the menu, and then all of a sudden you realize that what you want is not even on the menu, at least in the way that you recognize it. So, Alderman Davis, the first part of this recommendation is that the city employ a receptionist to both answer the phone and to greet and direct the public to their places of business within City Hall. Related to that is the second part of this motion. We have presently authorized in the budget a records clerk in the office of the city clerk. You will recall that that position is currently vacant, having been left vacant for study by board order. The Organization and Operations Committee proposes that the records clerk position in the office of the city clerk be abolished and that the budgetary line item be transferred to support the receptionist in City Hall. Transferred the exact line item of the budget so that this will be, from an expenditure point of view, a wash in the current budget. So that Mr. Davis, the second part, the records clerk position be abolished, and that the budgetary line item for that position be transferred to support the receptionist. In the third place, the Organization and Operation Committee recommends a related matter, that since the record clerk position is being abolished in the office of city clerk, that the duties of the record clerk in part be transferred to the other employees within the city clerk's office, the other employees, excluding the payroll clerk and the accounts payable clerk, that the duties be divided among the other employees. Fourth in this motion, and connected to this transfer of duties, that two of the duties presently listed as record clerk duties be transferred to the administrative assistant to the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. These two duties being the indexing of minutes. It is logical that the person who takes and transcribes minutes is in the best position to index minutes. So that function of the records clerk, and also the function of research into the minutes for things that are needed by way of documentation of past actions of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. And of course, when I say minutes, thank you, Alderman Cox, for because I consider them the same thing, we're also including the ordinances of the city, which are technically in a separate book of a bound volume of the city. So whenever I say the word minutes, substitute minutes and ordinances interchangeably there. So those two functions of indexing and research be transferred to the administrative assistant to the mayor and board. And finally, in the fifth place, that the Organization and Operation Committee, which by the way is composed of Alderman Cox, Alderman Perkins, Mayor Camp, Chief Administrative Officer Spruill, and I serve as the chairman, that the Organization and Operation Committee be the group that will interview all the applicants for the receptionist position. And so I offer for your consideration this motion composed of these 5 parts.
Do we have a second to that motion? Then we'll open it up to discussion.
Second.
We have a motion with a second, or is there discussion? Do we have questions?
Just a few, if you don't mind.
Certainly.
As far as the receptionist goes, I would like to see an official job description as far as what exactly it is that we would be voting on, what their duties would be, sort of an official outline of what it is that we'll actually be hiring for.
Okay, may I simply enumerate those for you right now because they're very, very simple.
Sure.
The person would be responsible for greeting all persons entering City Hall and helping them get where they need to get, assuming it's someplace in City Hall they need to get. Second, the person would be responsible for answering all incoming calls into the City Hall building, a switchboard, if you will, answering all incoming City Hall calls to City Hall and routing those to the appropriate recipient. Now, the committee discussed at that point, of course, it is appropriate for voicemail to pick up if the call is for the city engineer and he's out somewhere on a job, then his voicemail can pick up and they can leave a message asking him to return the call or whatever might be the case. Then the third function of this receptionist, because of course keep in mind this takes an inordinate amount of time given the traffic that comes into City Hall, would be some just additional duties that could be assigned, for example, sorting the mail that comes in. Doing word processing on a specific document that might be needed. Something that could be dealt with very easily within the context